At 2 a.m. the doorbell rang. A shirtless man smirked at me. He said, "She forgot her bra." In my car. I have never liked waking in the middle of the night. It's the kind of hour when the world feels heavier than it should, when even the smallest sound carries too much weight. That night, though, it wasn't some creak of the old apartment walls or the hum of the refrigerator that woke me. It was the sharp, insistent ring of the doorbell. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 2 a.m. Not the sort of hour for visitors. My fiancée, Daniela, stirred beside me, pulling the blanket up and mumbling something about the wind. But the bell rang again, longer this time, like whoever stood at the door had no intention of leaving. Half asleep, I slipped into my slippers and walked through the darkened living room. When I pulled the door open, what I saw jolted me into complete wakefulness. A man stood there shirtless, jeans hanging low on his hips, a smug grin stretched across his face as though he'd won some kind of private victory. His hair was damp, like he'd been outside long enough for the night's mist to settle on him. In his hand, dangling loosely between his fingers, was a lacy black bra that looked too familiar for comfort. He smirked and said something that still echoes in my mind, that Daniela had forgotten it in his car. For a few moments, I simply stood frozen. The hallway light behind him cast everything in harsh yellow, every detail sharp. The faint scrape on his knuckles, the smell of cigarette smoke clinging to him, the cocky way he shifted his weight. I didn't respond, not right away. My mind was already spinning, trying to anchor itself in logic, trying to dismiss what I was seeing. Daniela appeared behind me, wrapped in a robe, her hair disheveled but not quite in the way of someone who had just been asleep. Her eyes darted between me and the man, wide with alarm. She tried to laugh it off, asking who he was and why he was disturbing us. But her voice trembled, the kind of tremor you can't disguise when your body betrays you. I didn't say much to him, just shut the door slowly, holding his eyes the entire time, and locked it. He didn't resist. His smirk only widened, as though he had planted exactly the seed he wanted. Daniela turned on me, defensive already, saying the man was obviously drunk, probably mistaking our apartment for someone else's. She insisted she'd never seen him before. But even as she spoke, I noticed her robe hung slightly askew, the thin strap of her camisole peeking out, twisted like it had been pulled hastily. There was also the faintest trace of cologne clinging to her skin, not mine, and not one I recognized. I didn't argue with her. Not then. I just went back to bed, but sleep never returned. The next morning, everything appeared normal. She made coffee, kissed my cheek, and chatted about her work as though nothing unusual had happened. I matched her tone, but underneath, a storm had already started. The image of the shirtless man at my door wouldn't leave me. Neither would the detail of the bra. I knew Daniela owned one like it. I had seen it in our laundry. When she left for work, I sat at the table with my cup of coffee growing cold, staring at the security monitor. Our apartment complex had cameras at the entrance. I hadn't used the system much before, but that morning I dug into the recordings. The timestamp confirmed the man's arrival at 1:57 a.m. He hadn't stumbled, hadn't looked confused. He had walked directly to my door, pressed the bell, and waited. More telling was the footage from earlier in the evening. At 11:43 p.m., Daniela had slipped out of the building. She wore a long coat, her hair tied up in a bun, carrying a small purse. She hadn't said anything about leaving when we went to bed. The camera caught her returning at 1:46 a.m., looking around before hurrying inside. 14 minutes before the man showed up at my door. The evidence gnawed at me. She had left the house. She had returned looking uneasy. Then the man appeared, bra in hand, almost as if orchestrated. That night, I tried again to watch her closely without giving myself away. She seemed calm, almost too calm, as though she was putting on a performance for me. She leaned against me on the couch while we watched television, laughed at the right places, and acted affectionate. But there were moments when her eyes flicked to her phone with unease, as if she was waiting for a message that never came. I made no accusations. Silence gave me space to observe. And once I had decided to observe, I realized how much I had missed before. Her late returns from work, explained away as overtime. The new perfume she started wearing. The way she sometimes guarded her phone, setting it face down on the table. I told myself I could be imagining things. After all, suspicion once planted can grow into something distorted. But the bra, the shirtless man, and the footage were real. They weren't figments of imagination. 3 days later, I stayed awake until after midnight, pretending to sleep while I kept my breathing slow. At 12:30, she slipped out of bed. I heard the faint creak of the bedroom door, then the soft thud of her boots on the floor by the entryway. I gave her 10 minutes before I followed. From the window, I saw her walk briskly down the street, coat collar turned up, phone pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear what she said, but the way she smiled into the darkness made it clear she wasn't calling a sister or a coworker. I didn't follow farther that night. Instead, I returned to the couch and sat in silence, waiting for her. She came back almost 2 hours later, moving quickly as if she knew she had stretched her time. When she slid into bed beside me, her skin smelled faintly of smoke and a musky cologne. I closed my eyes and breathed evenly, feigning sleep. In the morning, she said she had been restless and gone for a walk to clear her head. I nodded, as though her explanation satisfied me. Inside, my resolve hardened. The next step was her phone. I didn't want to snoop, but snooping seemed like the only option left when truth refused to present itself willingly. One evening, while she showered, I picked it up. It was locked, of course, but her passcode wasn't difficult. Her birthday, reversed. The messages confirmed what I had begun to suspect. A thread with a contact saved only as our stretched back weeks. The last exchange, just 2 days before, was explicit enough that there could be no mistaking the nature of their relationship. They had arranged to meet at a motel outside town. The same night the shirtless man had stood at my door. I put the phone down before she emerged. My heart pounded, but my face was calm by the time she stepped back into the room. I could have confronted her right then, demanded an explanation, thrown everything into chaos. But something held me back. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the need for certainty. What if she tried to deny it? What if she twisted the story until I doubted myself? So I stayed silent and waited for the next move. Waiting is a powerful tool when you suspect someone is lying. It allows them to build their own web until they cannot escape it. And then, as if the universe wanted to remind me that silence has limits, another knock came 1 week later. Not at 2 a.m. this time, but close. Around 1:30. I opened the door and found an envelope on the floor. No note, no sender. Inside was a single photograph. Daniela and the same shirtless man, Ricky, entering a motel room. Her arm around his waist, his hand tangled in her hair. It was the kind of evidence no denial could erase. And it meant someone else, beyond me, knew what was happening. Someone was watching, just as I had been. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just uncovering an affair. I was stepping into something messy, a tangle of lies that might reach further than I had thought. And if someone else had gone to the trouble of documenting it, they might have their own reasons for making sure I saw it. That was the night I stopped doubting and started planning. The photograph lay on the kitchen table like a trap set for me alone. The edges curled upward from the humidity, and each time I looked away, I found my eyes drawn back. Daniela and Ricky, her arm wrapped around him, his hand tangled in her hair. A snapshot that confirmed what I had suspected, but the part that gnawed at me was not the betrayal itself. It was the question of who had wanted me to see it. Cheaters tend to be careless, but leaving an envelope at my door in the middle of the night wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate. Someone had watched her, taken the photo, printed it, and delivered it where I couldn't miss it. Which meant there were more players in this than I realized. I tucked the picture inside a book on the highest shelf and went about the morning as though nothing had happened. Daniela shuffled into the kitchen in her robe, yawning, asking if I'd made coffee. I poured her a cup and listened while she talked about errands and appointments. Her words blurred into noise, because I already knew the truth she was hiding, and every casual remark felt like a knife twisting deeper. But silence gave me time. Silence let me plan. That day at work, my mind wandered constantly. I teach at a local community college, and my lectures usually flow easily, but I caught myself losing my place mid-sentence, the words slipping through as if spoken by someone else. After class, I locked my office door and pulled out my laptop. I started with the motel. The sign in the photo was blurry, but recognizable, an old roadside place near the highway, the kind of establishment that doesn't ask many questions. I called under the pretense of needing a receipt from a stay last month. The desk clerk, a woman with a tired voice, wasn't helpful, but she let slip something useful. Daniela had been there more than once. That set the rhythm of my next few days. Quietly gathering pieces, moving as though life was normal while constructing a separate version of events beneath the surface. One evening, I returned home earlier than expected. Daniela wasn't there. Her car sat in the lot, but she was gone. I checked the security monitor again, and sure enough, she had left on foot about 20 minutes before. Coat on, purse slung over her shoulder, looking around before slipping down the street. I followed this time. I stayed back, letting the shadows and distance protect me. She moved quickly, weaving through side streets until she reached a gas station parking lot. A car waited there, Ricky's. He leaned against the driver's door, a cigarette glowing in his hand. When she approached, he dropped it, ground it out, and pulled her close. The kiss wasn't hesitant. It was practiced, familiar. They spoke briefly, too far away for me to hear, then got into the car and drove off. I didn't follow farther. Instead, I memorized the plate number. That night, she returned home around midnight, her hair undone, her coat crooked. She slid into bed beside me and whispered about being exhausted. I let her words wash over me without responding. The scent of smoke clung to her clothes. The next day, I dug deeper. The license plate traced back easily enough, registered to Ricky Adams, living 2 neighborhoods away. No criminal record, nothing unusual on paper. But social media revealed more. He had photos of himself at bars, concerts, pool halls. In some, Daniela appeared at the edges of the frame, not front and center, but close enough that their connection was undeniable. She wasn't tagged. She hadn't posted those photos. But she was there. Every discovery confirmed what I already knew. Yet each piece built a bigger picture. This wasn't a fling born of impulse. This had been going on long enough for them to appear together in public. Still, one question remained. Who had sent me the photograph? Neither Daniela nor Ricky had reason to expose themselves like that. If anything, they would have hidden harder, which meant someone else stood in the shadows. I didn't have to wait long for the answer. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. A text from an unknown number. You deserve to know the rest. Attached was another photo, Daniela again, but not with Ricky this time. She sat in the same motel parking lot, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. Dark hair, tailored jacket, older than Ricky. They leaned close, conspiratorial, like people who had shared more than conversation. The message rattled me more than the first. If Ricky wasn't the only one, then Daniela's betrayal was layered deeper than I'd thought. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, staring at the photo until dawn, trying to process how many versions of her existed outside the one she showed me at home. The following day, I drove to the motel myself. I didn't go inside. I sat in the parking lot, watching. The building looked worn, paint peeling from the trim, neon sign flickering. Cars came and went. People moved in and out. After half an hour, I spotted her. Daniela, in her familiar coat, slipping from one of the rooms to a car parked at the edge. Not Ricky's car. A different one. She didn't see me. She didn't even look around. She just got into the passenger seat and disappeared down the road. I felt an odd calm settle over me then, a steadiness that hadn't been there before. The first time, doubt had gnawed at me. The second time, anger burned. But now, seeing her with yet another man, the feelings twisted into something colder. Determination. When I returned home that evening, she greeted me with her usual warmth. She asked about my day, made dinner, set the table like always. I watched her move around the kitchen, cheerful, humming under her breath, acting like the woman I had once believed she was. And the thought kept circling. If she could live this lie so easily in front of me, what else was she capable of? I needed answers from Ricky directly. Waiting in shadows would only take me so far. The following weekend, I drove to his neighborhood. His house wasn't difficult to find, a modest single story with a dented truck in the driveway. I parked a street away and waited until he came out to smoke on the porch. Then I walked up. He recognized me immediately. His posture stiffened, the cigarette halfway to his lips. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. I simply asked how long it had been going on. At first, he tried to bluff. Said I had the wrong idea, that Daniela was just a friend. But when I mentioned the motel and her late-night visits, his face changed. He exhaled smoke slowly, staring at me like weighing a decision. Finally, he admitted the truth. They had been seeing each other for months. He claimed Daniela had told him she was basically single, that I was only some roommate or ex she hadn't gotten rid of yet. He spoke like a man who felt cheated too, though his smirk from that first night still lingered in my memory, making it difficult to take his regret at face value. When I asked about the older man, Ricky stiffened again. He didn't know much, only that Daniela sometimes disappeared without explanation, returning distant. He suspected there was someone else, but he hadn't pressed her. Leaving his house, I realized the situation was far more tangled than a simple affair. Ricky had been just one piece of it. That night, Daniela sensed my distance. She asked why I was quiet, why I seemed distracted. I told her I was tired, buried in work. She accepted the excuse without pressing, but her eyes lingered on me longer than usual, as if searching for cracks. I lay awake beside her, thinking of the envelope, the photographs, Ricky's confession, and the unknown sender who seemed intent on dragging every secret into the light. Whoever they were, they knew more than I did. And sooner or later, I would have to find out who was pulling the strings. When the next message came, I wasn't surprised. This time, it wasn't just a photo. It was a video clip. Daniela at the motel again, entering a room with the older man. The camera angle suggested it had been filmed from inside another car, zoomed just enough to capture their faces. The text read, "Ask her about Julian." Finally, a name. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Someone had laid the path for me. and I could no longer pretend it was coincidence. Whoever watched Daniela wasn't simply exposing her for my benefit. They had their own agenda, and they wanted me involved. Julian. The name hung in my mind like a riddle that refused to solve itself. The anonymous text had handed it to me cleanly, but nothing about this situation was clean. I knew nothing of him. No face beyond the blurry video. No details except that Daniela was tangled with him too. And yet, whoever was feeding me information had decided I needed to know. That meant Julian wasn't just another stranger. He mattered. I started where anyone would, online. The name alone was too broad, but combined with the fragments I had, older man, expensive jacket, seen at a motel, patterns emerged. After a night of cross-checking social profiles, company directories, and local news mentions, I found him. Julian Vargas, 45, married, partner at a mid-sized construction firm with projects across town. His face matched the man in the video exactly, the kind of polished smile meant for press releases and ribbon cuttings. I sat back, staring at his photo on the screen. Daniela hadn't just strayed into Ricky's orbit. She was balancing an affair with someone married, someone who had far more to lose if the truth spilled out. And now, by extension, I was holding that rope too. The next few days, I shadowed her quietly, tracing her routines. Twice, I saw her slip into the same cafe on the west side where businessmen lingered over late lunches. Each time, Julian appeared minutes later. They didn't touch in public, but the way their bodies angled toward each other, the way her laughter came too quickly, it was intimacy disguised as friendship. I snapped photos, not for satisfaction, but for proof. My hands barely shook as I did it. At this point, numbness had replaced shock. It was no longer about believing she betrayed me. It was about how many layers existed, how many lies stacked on top of one another. The question I couldn't shake was the sender. Whoever had taken the videos had access I didn't. They knew when and where to watch. It wasn't Ricky, because he'd spoken as though blindsided. It couldn't be Julian, either. He had no reason to sabotage himself. Which left someone on the periphery. It was at the motel, during a late afternoon stakeout, that I found the answer. A woman with auburn hair stepped outside to smoke near the front office. I recognized her faintly from one of my visits. She wore the uniform polo with the motel's logo stitched above the breast pocket. She glanced at me twice, her eyes holding a knowing weight before she turned away. I approached casually, asked if business was always this busy. She shrugged, exhaling smoke, then said something that pinned everything together. If you're here about Daniela, you're not the first. Her name was Lisa, and she didn't flinch when I told her I was Daniela's fiancé. She had seen Daniela more than once, sometimes with Ricky, sometimes with Julian. From her tone, it was clear she carried little sympathy for my fiancé. Lisa explained that she'd started documenting Daniela's visits after catching her slipping away from multiple rooms in a single week. At first, it was curiosity. Then it turned into disgust. Eventually, she'd decided someone had to know. That someone was me. The pieces fell into place. Lisa was my silent messenger, the source of the photos and videos. She wanted Daniela exposed, not out of kindness to me, but because she couldn't stand watching the charade continue. I asked why she involved herself. Lisa stubbed her cigarette and said people who play with others' lives deserve the spotlight, turned back on them. Then she handed me her number, told me she could pass along anything else she caught. Driving home, the plan began to crystallize. If Daniela had managed to balance Ricky and Julian without either man knowing, maybe it was time they found out. Together, the setup took a week. I contacted Ricky first, framing it as a chance to clear the air. I told him we both deserved to confront the truth directly. His resentment made him agree faster than I expected. Julian was trickier. I called his office, introduced myself under the guise of a concerned acquaintance, and hinted that his wife might appreciate knowing about Daniela. His silence on the line stretched long before he finally asked to meet. I chose neutral ground, a cafe in the city center, crowded enough to keep things civil, but quiet enough for conversation. What neither man knew was that I had arranged for both of them to arrive within minutes of each other. The day of the meeting, I sat in a corner booth nursing coffee, pulse steady, camera discreetly in my jacket pocket. Ricky arrived first, casual as always, leaning back in his chair with that cocky half-smile. Julian entered soon after, crisp in a tailored coat, his eyes narrowing as he spotted us. At first, neither spoke. The tension thickened until Ricky barked a laugh, asking why this guy was here. Julian looked between us, confusion sliding into realization. I let the silence hang, then laid out what I knew: Daniela's visits, the motel, the overlapping timelines. Their reactions mirrored their roles. Ricky erupted, pounding his fist against the table, muttering curses under his breath. Julian grew pale, his jaw clenched, eyes flicking as though calculating risks. The calm businessman facade cracked just enough to show the panic underneath. And then, like clockwork, Daniela herself appeared. I hadn't invited her. She must have sensed something was off. Maybe Ricky let something slip. Maybe Julian had acted strangely. Either way, she pushed through the cafe door, spotted the three of us, and froze. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Ricky stood, his voice sharp, accusing her of lying to him about being single. Julian followed, his voice lower but heavier, demanding answers. Daniela stammered, tried to play both sides, said they were misinterpreting everything. Her face flushed, her hands shook. The scene spiraled fast. Ricky shoved his chair back, nearly toppling it. Julian hissed that she had ruined everything. His career, his marriage. Customers began staring, whispers spreading. Daniela's composure shattered as she pleaded with both of them, shifting blame, insisting none of it was serious. I stayed seated, recording quietly as the chaos unfolded. My chest felt hollow, not from sadness, but from the strange satisfaction of watching lies collapse under their own weight. Within minutes, Daniela bolted for the door, tears streaking her cheeks, fleeing into the street. Ricky followed, shouting, while Julian remained behind, slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. When I finally left, I had the recording secured, proof of everything. Not just her betrayal, but the unraveling of her double life in front of both men. That night, Daniela didn't come home. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I sat alone in the apartment, the video playing on my screen, the sound of her panicked voice overlapping with Ricky's rage and Julian's fury. It was the raw truth captured in real time. And though part of me wondered what her next move would be, a larger part already knew. She would try to twist it, to blame me, to claw back some control. People like her never accept exposure quietly. But I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time, I felt ahead of her. The apartment felt strangely silent without her. For years, Daniela had filled every corner with noise. Her laughter, her constant phone calls, the shuffle of her heels across the floor. That night, after the cafe confrontation, she didn't return. I sat in the dim light of the living room with the recording playing back on my laptop, each voice sharp and undeniable. By the following afternoon, I got my first taste of her counterattack. A message from her mother appeared on my phone, scathing and full of accusations. Daniela had told her family I'd humiliated her in public, set her up, and stalked her with cameras. The words dripped with rehearsed outrage. She had twisted the scene, painting herself as a victim of some jealous obsession. It wasn't unexpected. I had seen the panic in her eyes as she fled the cafe. She was cornered, and people like Daniela don't accept corners. They lash out, rewrite, weaponize sympathy. I didn't respond to her mother. Instead, I gathered my evidence, photos, the anonymous envelope, the video recording of the cafe confrontation, and Ricky's admission. I uploaded everything to a secure drive, copies on a flash drive tucked inside my desk. If Daniela wanted a war of stories, I had the facts. 2 days later, Ricky called me. His voice, usually arrogant, was stripped raw. He told me Daniela had shown up at his place in tears, blaming me for everything, saying I had stalked her, manipulated the situation. Ricky didn't believe her. He had seen enough in that cafe to know the truth. He admitted he was done with her. The last words he said before hanging up were bitter. She'll burn everything down before she lets go. He wasn't wrong. Julian came next. I didn't speak to him directly, but word traveled fast. His wife found out. Whether Daniela confessed or someone else tipped her off, I'll never know. What I do know is that within a week, whispers circled through the community about Julian moving out of his house. The construction firm issued a vague press release about him, taking a leave of absence. One careless affair can be contained. 2 overlapping ones, exposed publicly, spread like wildfire. And then Daniela turned her fire on me. She showed up at the apartment one evening, makeup smeared, eyes red but still sharp with calculation. She didn't knock. She used her key, storming in as though nothing had changed. She demanded to know why I had ruined her life, accused me of betrayal, shouted that everything we had built was crumbling because I couldn't mind my own business. I let her rant until her words wore thin. Then I pulled out the flash drive and laid it on the table. I told her the evidence was there, all of it. Photos, videos, recordings. Proof that no one could twist. Her face drained of color. For the first time, I saw genuine fear beneath her fury. She lunged at the drive, but I caught it before she could grab it. I didn't threaten her with it. I didn't need to. I just told her it existed, that she would never again be able to rewrite me into her lies. She left that night without another word. The days that followed unfolded like dominoes tipping. Her parents, once convinced of her innocence, received the truth in the form of a carefully sent package, select clips and photos, enough to dismantle her story. They didn't call me afterward, but I knew from mutual friends that their support for her collapsed almost instantly. Julian's wife filed for separation. Ricky vanished from her orbit entirely. The apartment felt emptier, yes, but also freer. Daniela tried once more, a final desperate attempt. At 2 a.m., weeks after everything had unraveled, the doorbell rang again. The sound froze me in place, dredging up the memory of that first night, the smirking stranger with the bra. This time, when I opened the door, it was Daniela herself. Her hair was unkempt, her coat too thin for the cold night. She stood shivering, eyes wet, begging me to let her in. She spoke about forgiveness, about rebuilding, about how none of it had to end this way. Her voice broke in ways that almost sounded real, but I had seen enough masks slip to know the difference. Her tears weren't about love. They were about loss of comfort, of safety, of the image she had maintained. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply closed the door. Her voice rose behind it, first pleading, then cursing, then finally fading as her footsteps retreated down the hall. Life after her wasn't simple. There were whispers from colleagues, curious glances from neighbors, the lingering tension of being attached to a scandal. But with time, those whispers faded. I focused on my work, rebuilt my routines, and began to feel the ground solid under my feet again. The evidence remained locked away, never shared publicly, never weaponized beyond what was necessary. I didn't need to destroy her further. She had done that herself. As for Daniela, I heard fragments. She lost her job after too many absences. Friends distanced themselves once they realized her stories didn't add up. She moved into a smaller apartment across town. Her name surfaced less and less until it vanished entirely from the circles we once shared. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to that first doorbell ring. How quickly everything shifted, how fragile the foundation really was. Betrayal rarely announces itself so directly, but when it does, it leaves no room for denial. The consequences didn't just fall on her, they fell on everyone she touched. Ricky, stripped of his illusions. Julian, his career and marriage fractured. Her parents, forced to confront the daughter they defended. And me, left standing in the wreckage but finally free of the lies. It didn't feel like victory. Not really. But it felt like clarity. And clarity, after so much shadow, was enough.